अध्यक्ष महोदया, माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैम, आपका इस वेबिनार में सादर स्वागत एवं हार्दिक अभिनंदन है। हमारे सम्मानीय वक्तागण प्रोफेसर सिलीमा नंदा जी एवं डॉक्टर प्रिथा बनर्जी जी तथा उपस्थित सभी विद्वज्जन, प्राध्यापकगण और प्रिय प्रतिभागियों, हिंदी विश्वविद्यालय द्वारा आयोजित इस गरिमामय शैक्षणिक वेबिनार में आप सभी का हार्दिक अभिनंदन है। आज का ये आभासी मंच हमें विभिन्न साहित्यिक परंपराओं को एक व्यापक वैश्विक परिप्रेक्ष्य में देखने और समझने का अवसर प्रदान करता है। जब भिन्न भाषाएं, संस्कृतियां और अनुभव एक साथ संवाद करते हैं, तब साहित्य केवल अभिव्यक्ति का माध्यम नहीं रहता, बल्कि वो एक जीवंत सेतु बन जाता है, जो विविध समाजों की संवेदनाओं, विचारों और दृष्टियों को जोड़ता है। इस वेबिनार के माध्यम से हम न केवल साहित्यिक विविधता के स्वरूप को समझने का प्रयास करेंगे, बल्कि उन अंतर्धाराओं को भी पहचानेंगे जो विश्व साहित्य को एक साझा मानवीय अनुभव में रूपांतरित करती है। यह अवसर हम सभी के लिए चिंतन, विमर्श और नए दृष्टिकोणों को आत्मसात करने का एक महत्वपूर्ण क्षण है। अब मैं अत्यंत प्रसन्नता एवं सम्मान के साथ हमारी अध्यक्ष महोदया, माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैडम का संक्षिप्त परिचय प्रस्तुत करना चाहूंगी। प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैम एक प्रख्यात शिक्षाविद, अंतर्राष्ट्रीय स्तर पर प्रतिष्ठित लेखिका तथा भारतीय अंग्रेजी साहित्य की सशक्त प्रतिनिधि हैं। आपने इग्नू नई दिल्ली के विदेशी भाषा संकाय की निदेशिका के रूप में महत्वपूर्ण दायित्वों का सफल निर्वहन किया है। एक सृजनशील कवयित्री, सशक्त रचनाकार एवं लोक साहित्य की विदुषी के रूप में आपकी विशिष्ट पहचान है। आपके द्वारा रचित एवं संपादित लगभग 23 से अधिक ग्रंथ प्रकाशित हो चुके हैं, जो आपके व्यापक साहित्यिक अवदान को रेखांकित करते हैं। शैक्षणिक उत्कृष्टता के लिए आप स्नातक एवं स्नातकोत्तर स्तर पर स्वर्ण पदक से सम्मानित रही हैं। साथ ही आपको भारत के माननीय उपराष्ट्रपति द्वारा भी स्वर्ण पदक प्राप्त हुआ है। आपको माइकल मधुसूदन अकादमी पुरस्कार, लाइफ टाइम अचीवमेंट सम्मान, टैगोर सम्मान, मानद फेलोशिप तथा एम्बेसडर ऑफ इटर्निटी अवार्ड सहित अनेक प्रतिष्ठित सम्मानों से अलंकृत किया जा चुका है। आपके शोध एवं अध्ययन के क्षेत्र नव साहित्य, आलोचनात्मक सिद्धांत, लोक साहित्य, संस्कृति अध्ययन, भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा तथा तुलनात्मक विश्व साहित्य जैसे विविध आयामों को समेटे हुए हैं। अब मैं सादर निवेदन करती हूँ कि माननीय कुलपति महोदय प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैडम अपने उद्घाटन उद्बोधन द्वारा इस संगोष्ठी का शुभारंभ करें और हमें विचारों से समृद्ध करें। मैडम प्लीज।
Thank you so much, Dr. Paramita, for this generosity. Sabhi ko namaskar. Very good morning. I feel privileged and happy to welcome Dr. Silima Nanda and Dr. Pritha Banerjee to Hindi University Special Lecture Series as our very important speakers, contributors. I have a very long association with both the speakers. I will go to that after I give them a little bit of information regarding this particular lecture series. Unless they have checked some of our YouTube videos, already 60 or 70 videos have been uploaded on social media on the YouTube channels, Hindi University Special YouTube channel on comparative world literatures. Along with that, translation workshops, and we had training and placement workshops. We had multiple workshops, but this particular lecture series, Comparative World Literatures, that we started last year, Dr. Paramita being the coordinator, and she has been managing it wonderfully with the support of our staff, Aman and Kajoli and Karima and all of them. So this lecture series is going glorious. The best brains of the country, very powerful researchers across the disciplines and countries and continents have been contributing to this. If you get time, please go through a few videos that they have already contributed, and various universities are already approaching us to use this lecture series as a part of their teaching learning process. So when you contribute to this lecture series, Dr. Silima Nanda and Dr. Pritha, probably your lectures will also be useful not just for the students and faculty of Hindi University as a part of our coursework, our syllabus design. Also, your videos are going to be used by various other universities. Of course, the copyright is with us, so they have to seek special permission from Hindi University to use, this lecture, the videos of this lecture. As far as the topics are concerned, Dr. Paramita has already given a little bit of information to you, brief introduction on her, introductory speech. She talked about the varieties of topics, the interdisciplinary subjects that our speakers have taken. They have been speaking on various subjects under the umbrella term comparative world literatures. The topics vary from British literature to American literature to Hispanic literature, Latin American literature, folk literature, oral studies, and tribal studies and Indian knowledge systems, Hindu studies, English studies, translation, pedagogy, and even medical humanities and hospitality. You take a name, we have one lecture there. So we are very happy and proud of this particular lecture series, that people are coming up with such innovative and interesting ideas to us, and they are sharing their research, their hard-earned research with us so generously. In fact, we all agree that knowledge sharing is knowledge production. So this Hindi University Special Lecture Series is a platform for knowledge production. People have been sharing their knowledge and producing new interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, and multidisciplinary areas of research for our students and faculty and for the country. People from three or four countries have also contributed to this lecture series. You can just have a look sometime when you are free. Now, coming to my association with the two speakers today, this is my moral, emotional, and ethical and academic responsibility to put it on record that both of them have contributed to my growth, my research, and to the growth of the respective institutions that they have worked. Dr. Silima Nanda has worked as an administrator, as a researcher, as a PhD guide, as a professor, as a teacher. She has played many roles, and I think she has huge fan following. People have been looking at her work, and she never says no to any important or interesting work that comes in front of her. She's one of the most generous persons, and she's one of my personal favorites, definitely. And Professor Silimananda, thank you so much for accepting this invitation and for being a part of Hindi University Lecture Series. This is just the beginning. In future, we will invite you on many online and offline platforms. Please be a part of Hindi University forever and ever. And Dr. Pritha Banerjee, if you just look at her social media posts, you will see that she's doing so many things together. She is a creative writer, she is a critic, one of the young and brightest scholars probably the country is witnessing. She is a very promising voice, and she has contributed to IGNOU chapters, IGNOU units, be it American literature when I was designing those courses on American literature, on folk literature, British Romantic literature, post-colonial studies, children's literature. So there were many courses that I was designing for IGNOU when I was an associate professor, then I was a professor, I was a director. But every time Dr. Pritha was very much there, and she has contributed very meaningful work, research, and original work, and her original research, which has a new dimension, a new approach to any subject. She doesn't submit redundant work that is very conventional and traditional. If you give it to her, she will make it interdisciplinary, and she will make it look very challenging and interesting. That is her quality, and with a smile she accepts work and she delivers. So I have very deep affection for Pritha. I took her first name. I welcome you to be a part of this Hindi University Special Lecture Series. You have very huge shoes to step in if you look at the kind of speakers that have spoken for us. But yes, I'm confident that nothing less is expected from you. You are one of those people who may be very young but who has very broad and interesting and important ideas. So please share your research with us on this Hindi University Special Lecture Series on comparative world literatures. Once I have, attended the lectures by the two of you, I may be in a position to ask a few questions or to give a few comments, but only after I have listened to both of you. And thanks to Dr. Silima Nanda and Dr. Pritha for having accepted our invitation. Now I hand it over to Dr. Paromita to carry forward. Thank you and namaste.
बहुत बहुत आभार मैम। अब मैं आज की प्रथम विशिष्ट वक्ता प्रोफेसर सिलिमा नंदा जी का परिचय प्रस्तुत करना चाहूंगी। प्रोफेसर सिलिमा नंदा इंदिरा गांधी राष्ट्रीय मुक्त विश्वविद्यालय नई दिल्ली से अतिरिक्त निदेशक के पद से सेवानिवृत्त हुई हैं। उन्होंने उत्कल विश्वविद्यालय से अंग्रेजी साहित्य में अध्ययन किया और अमेरिका नाटक पर पीएचडी की प्राप्ति की। साथ ही उन्होंने एलएलबी, बीएड तथा दूरस्थ शिक्षा में परास्नातक की उपाधियां भी अर्जित की हैं। उन्होंने लगभग 39 वर्षों तक उड़ीसा के सरकारी महाविद्यालयों में अध्यापन किया और बाद में इग्नू के अंतर्राष्ट्रीय प्रभाग में निदेशक के रूप में कार्य करते हुए वैश्विक शैक्षणिक सहयोग को सुदृढ़ करने में महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाई। उन्होंने वैल्यू एजुकेशन पाठ्यक्रम के विकास में भी उल्लेखनीय योगदान दिया है। वे अनेक शोधार्थियों का मार्गदर्शन भी उन्होंने किया है। 5 पुस्तकों की लेखिका हैं तथा देश विदेश में कई अंतर्राष्ट्रीय सम्मेलनों में मुख्य वक्ता के रूप में व्याख्यान भी दे चुकी हैं। उनके प्रमुख अध्ययन क्षेत्र अमेरिकी साहित्य, जेंडर स्टडीज, लोक एवं जनजातीय अध्ययन है। अब मैं प्रोफेसर सिलिमा नंदा मैडम से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वे अपने विचार प्रस्तुत करें। मैडम प्लीज।
Thank you so much, Paromita. I think good day to all of you. First, I should thank Vice-Chancellor formally, but my dear friend Nandini, my colleague, and like my younger sister, for your kind and generous words. I can really feel the affection and warmth you have. Still, it is sustained with you. So I feel proud of that, So the Professor Nandini Sahu, Vice-Chancellor of Hindi University, Dr. Pritha Banerjee, and Paromita, and other respected professors who must be participating online on this webinar today. I feel honored to have been invited to render this keynote address on comparative world literature. Now, coming to the subject, when we studied, we only heard about American literature, British literature, even Commonwealth literature also, very few universities had. And translation studies was not in vogue also. So we were, like compartmentalized. We are compartmentalized, only American, or you have to study translation, or you have to study British literature. So we had no idea that literature can be borderless. Literature can be limitless. Literature can be without confines. Literature can be accessible to one and all. Literature can be so democratic, We were all guided by canons, literary canons. This has to be written, that has to be studied. But I think we have a lot of freedom today, how to go about it. And that freedom, I think, this comparative world literature has provided to one and all. So you can say it is a world of connections. Everywhere we are connected, not only as human beings, but the literatures are connected. So Matthew Arnold had rightly said, everywhere there is a connection. Everywhere there is an illustration. No single event and no single literature is adequately comprehended except in relation to other events, to other literatures. Can you just share the slides, because I couldn't do it from my side, Paromita? You just can show the slides and I can go about it. Yeah, you can come to the third slide. Yeah, third slide. So how relevant is comparative literature today? That is the question. Comparative literature is the only answer for the researchers. It is relevant in today's globalized world because it promotes cultural understanding across the globe, encourages a global perspective, develops critical thinking, and encourages us to analyze and compare different texts and we develop an interdisciplinary approach. So in a way, it fosters sympathy, tolerance, and also helps in improving our language skills and increasing our ability to communicate across cultural and linguistic barriers. Coming to evolution, can you come to the third slide, please? Evolution. Can you just highlight that? Oh no, yeah, no. Come to the third next slide, please. I think okay, it's fine. Now we're coming to evolution. World literature as a discipline has received a significant momentum since the 19th century. The long list of intellectuals and scholars from almost every corner of the world, starting from Goethe to Damrosch, Casanova to Gayatri Spivak and Milan Kundera, have not only projected their respective views to define this new discipline, but also broadened the dimension of world literature. The origin of world literature can be traced back to Weimar, a small town in Germany, 1827. Goethe's proclamation, the epoch of world literature is at hand, and each of us must work to hasten its approach. This announced a new beginning in the field of comparative literature. Not only Goethe, but from India, Goethe and Tagore together, we can say, they envisioned the possibility of world literature when the concept of world literature was not nourished completely. Goethe predicted that the work that appeals to the masses would enjoy limitless expansion. And in this context, we can say, Rabindranath Tagore also said, Tulnatmak Sahitya. That's not the need, but what is needed is a Vishwa Sahitya, world literature. He advocated world literature. According to Tagore, world literature is like a master mansion where the master builders, you can say the authors, the contributors, contribute to the continuous process of mansion building through their work. After Goethe, if you see the evolution, it was Friedrich Engels and Karl Marx, 1848, who stated that from the numerous national and local literature, there arises a world literature. The Communist Manifesto aspired to be a model of world literature, and in this process, got translated into 6 languages. Imagine 6 languages in 1848, English, French, German, Italian, Flemish, and Dutch. The Chinese scholar Zheng Zhenduo in 1922 also emphasized the need for the global unity of literature. So in spite of the differences between literature arising from the locality, nationality, period, and style, that is what Zhenduo had emphasized. Damrosch, in his book, What is World Literature?, attempted to give clarity to the concept of world literature, stating that as criteria to enter into the world forum, the literary works can either be a classic, masterpiece, or window on the world. So against the background of the 19th century, comparative literature developed. World literature, you can say, it developed into had a transnational dimension by articulating heterogeneity, fostering exchange of texts, ideas, and attuning to the disciplinary, cultural, and linguistic fields. So next slide, 4th slide, you can come. 4th slide, this one, number 4. Next slide, please come to the next slide. So what do we call, what are the features of global literature? First comes, it is multi-layered. It doesn't have a single theme. it's a combination of all disciplines. It's a beautiful blend, you can say, of literature, language, culture, discipline, all in one. Then it is contextual. It is related to the context of the society we are living in. So it is not, you can say, it's not fantasy. It is something which is related to the context, which is related to the contemporary situation. So that makes it very realistic, contextual. And then it is interdisciplinary. I'll already tell you, not only interdisciplinary, it's multidisciplinary, you can say pluridisciplinary. And it involves a lot of teamwork also, it's not a contribution of one person, it has to be a teamwork, then only it grows. So it is a combination of globalization, it is a combination of vis-a-vis, you can say, localization. So it is both global and at the same time it is local. And the best part is that it has decolonized itself. It has defied colonization, because till that time, till the 19th century, you can say that the late 18th century, it was American literature, or it was British literature, or it was a European literature that were dominating. They were shaping the ideas. They were shaping the thinking of other literatures, of other countries. So we always owed to them. But now, no, we are now independent. We have our own thinking. So we can grow on our own. Next slide. We can now there is a, you can say, there is a paradigm shift. It has a paradigm shift. Yeah, it's already I've already discussed that. It's a paradigm shift. So in the major development in this field over the last 30 years is the resurgence, as you call, of world literature, and it's a dominant paradigm which is understood this time not as Eurocentric vision of the 19th century, but as the post-colonial recalibration of international relations. No longer it is question of studying one literature, but of studying literatures to see what their encounters tell us about the world. So comparative literature reflects the social, political, and cultural changes in the climate of the contemporary world. The paradigm of world literature has also contributed to the challenge of the prevailing national histories of literature, and it has drawn attention to the process of new canon making. So in this context, now the question is, where does Indian literature stand? So the Western models were applied to study the Indian literature. Earlier, I've already told you. But in the 20th century, the world literature was considered as a framework for the national production. So now the attempt to look beyond the Eurocentric approach made the Indian intellectuals put forward several models for a better study. The universal model of world literature first was pioneered by Rabindranath Tagore. He identified the role of every author in the making of world literature. And according to Tagore, interconnectivity of the entire humanity is the subject of world literature. So the abstract idea of world literature, Viswa Sahitya, served as the base on which several other theorists built their conception. Like we take Sri Aurobindo. He focused on a critical standard to create an assembly of the poets of the world based on 4 criteria: imaginative originality, expressive power, creative genius, and scope of subject matter. Professor Shiv Prakash, eminent poet and playwright, in an interview, he says, the hegemony of the English language is a threat to the development of Indian literature. The way to elevate Indian literature is to study it from a non-Eurocentric perspective. We need to visualize literature, not only in English, but in several languages, and that is the real essence of world literature. So the literary text must travel beyond the boundaries of nations, countries. Languages must go through translations like stories Ali Baba, Aladdin, Adventures of Tinbad, Thief of Baghdad. These are masterpieces, Tale of Genji, which have exposed the world to the oldest and rich narratives. So the literary works which had remained unnoticed, so far needs to be referred to I think it should be referred to the university curriculum or by academicians, or maybe the subject of research, you can say, to increase the appreciation by these masses, by these elite masses, the educated masses, so that they would expose themselves to the different literatures of the world. Literature, world literature without translation, we cannot think of it. Translation is the main mode of world literatures, because it talks about different literatures, different nations. So in today's world of globalization, translation has become the primary mechanism through which the global circulation of literary narratives takes place, facilitating cross-cultural dialogues. So it is the primary tool, you can say, for the transnational mobility of literary works. And in 2022, the International Federation of Translators reported that on a global scale, about 65% of literary works published worldwide are translated from one language to another. Susan Bassnett, very famous name, has a remarkable contribution in the field of translation studies. She focused on the essential role of a translator in establishing the link between the author and the new target readers. She further stated that translation connects the languages and also the ways of life. Free automatic translations on all platforms should guarantee the diversity of languages in comparative world literature and avoid any restriction to English. For example, as you can see, periodicals and platforms of polylogically oriented comparative literature should provide digital translation programs with the means of artificial intelligence to ensure that research is accessible to a wide audience on our planet. Translation does more than transfuse a cultural situation. It obliterates the reader's need to look for the original. Not only does the translator eradicate the foreignness in the translated text, he also manages to incorporate cultural and political content from the original source text to create a richly hybridized text in English. So it is the only medium, you can say, to assemble this fragmented world and the fragmented literatures. So any literary work can be translated for readers of other languages, because as human beings, we all share the same sentiments, though our cultural differences are not dissimilar, you can say. Our core sentiments remain the same. Who would not like to read Kalidas's Sakuntala? Tell me. Homer's Iliad, Shakespeare's Hamlet, even though they have different special temporal settings, we have a natural curiosity, to know about the other. That is why regional language works will be read and appreciated by readers of other cultures and needs to be translated into different languages, especially English, because it is a global lingua franca. If you take, for example, when classical Chinese poetry was translated into English, the process involved not merely linguistic conversion, but also established literary scholars' interpretations of cultural symbols, historical references, as well as aesthetic principles that were embedded in the original poetic text. So you see, translation, the word sounds very simple. But when you translate, like I have translated many poems, it is so difficult process, because you have to understand the ethos, you have to understand the symbols, you have to understand the culture, you have to take it holistically, and also keep in mind the target audience, the target readers, and then only the piece can be translated, or maybe the work can be translated. So there are literary flows, we can say, through which world literature can spread further. And these literary flows involves literary adaptations and digital platforms. So what is this literary adaptations? So literary adaptations has created a booming market nowadays, especially because of film adaptations, stage plays, graphic novels of literary and dramatic works, and they are gaining new audiences. For example, I don't understand Malayali language, but if I have an opportunity to see that Malayali movie subtitled in English, I understand Malayali, not only the language, I understand the Malayali culture, I understand the whole Malayali society, how it is, the morals, the cultures, the traditions, everything. So it helps us to understand world literature. Adaptations often undergo processes of cultural hybridization by blending the narrative elements of the source text with those of the target culture, producing new hybrid works. According to statistics from the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, 55% of the top grossing films worldwide now, it is in 2023, I'm talking about, are literary adaptations. For instance, in India, you say Shakespeare's plays have been adapted in Bollywood to the Indian cultural context. You can take the film Omkara. It is an adaptation of Shakespeare's play Othello. That has recontextualized and reinterpreted the tragic theme of power, jealousy, and passion in the Indian cultural context by addressing issues such as the redistribution of wealth and power in the Indian society. So this is the impact, you can say, of literary adaptations. Next, we talk of digital platforms. It's a very common word these days. It's a buzzword, you can say. So global digital platform have profoundly changed the spread and circulation of literature in space, altering the formation of comparative literature itself. Like you take online publishing sites, e-books, distributors, and literary blogs. They have democratized the spread of the world's literature by making it easier than ever for authors to disseminate their works to a global audience. According to International Publishers Association, IPA, digital book sales in 2022 comprised 25% of the world's publishing market, with much of this sales across national boundaries. So digital platforms have brought together readers and writers from all over the world into a new global community that is actively engaging in the production, spread, and consumption of foreign literature. The analysis of digital literary culture contributes to comparative world literature by delving deeper into how globalization is reconceiving the limits of literary production and consumption in the digital realm. So now we have started construction new global literary canons. For example, the growing celebration of African literature in the works of authors like, say, Chinua Achebe or Ngozi Adichie are now included in 75% of comparative world literature courses around the world. And this is the result of a 2022 survey conducted by the African Literature Association. By fostering an expansion of literary canons that are more inclusive, and more critical, comparative world literature contributes to a deeper understanding of the challenges and resistances that befall intercultural dialogue in the era of globalization. A report by the Post-Colonial Studies Association shows that post-colonial literature has increased its share in the humanities curricula by 30% in the past 10 years. So this is how a decolonization of the global literary canons has taken place. And now there is a rebalancing in which the peripheral works are gaining more visibility in the global literary marketplace, not the forum, the marketplace. Now coming to mythology, which is also a very ingrained part of world comparative literature. So it explores mythologies that have been shared, adapted, reinterpreted across cultures, revealing a complex web of cultural exchange and influence. By examining the influence of mythology on literary genres, we can see how these themes and motifs have been adapted and reinterpreted over time. We find significant similarities between the mythological narratives of ancient Greece and Norse mythology. Both cultures have myths that explore the origin, define the origin of the world, as well as narrative that describes the end of the world. To cite examples, you can say Homer's Iliad and Odyssey draws on Greek mythology to explore the heroic journey and struggle between good and evil. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, it draws on Norse and Celtic mythology to create a rich and immersive fantasy world. Margaret Atwood's The Penelope, which retells Homer's Odyssey from the perspectives of Penelope, drawing on Greek mythology to explore the human condition. Now, as regards Indian mythology, it has played a significant role in shaping early literary traditions in Asia and beyond. The Sanskrit epics, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata became influential models for other epics such as the Greek Iliad and Odyssey. In medieval Europe, Indian stories were translated into Latin and other languages, influencing works such as the medieval romances. The Panchatantra, a collection of fables, also found widespread popularity in the West. The 19th century witnessed a renewed interest in Indian Ralph Waldo Emerson. In mythology, the 19th century witnessed a renewed interest in Indian mythology in Europe and America. Romantic poets and writers such as Blake, Emerson were fascinated by the insights into the human nature of Indian mythologies. In the 20th and 21st centuries, Indian mythology continued to inspire contemporary literature. Authors from around the world have drawn upon its characters, themes, symbols to create works that explore diverse issues, including identity, cultural heritage, and human condition. To give just a few examples, you can say The Jungle Book by Rudyard Kipling. It was inspired by the Panchatantra. The God of Smeltings, which is a post-colonial novel by Arundhati Roy, it weaves elements of Indian mythology, history, and contemporary social issues. The Inheritance of Loss by Kiran Desai, a post-colonial novel again, which explores the impact of Indian mythology and history on the lives of its characters. So Indian mythology has had an enduring impact on global literatures, inspiring countless works of art and imagination. Its rich characters, captivating storylines, profound themes continue to resonate with readers worldwide. Now, talking about the challenges, because
For the interruption, ma'am.
yeah,
Would you like to shift the slide to?
yeah, because apparently go on changing it. You come to the future challenges. I'm in that part of it now.
Amanji,
If it is you can understand my address, then no translation is over. Next, go to the next slide. I think the mythology part is also over. That part is done. It's done. Mythology and folklore, mythology. Next. Future challenges. Yes.
thank you.
Yeah. What are they? Please next. Show me the next screen. Next one. These are the future challenges. So what are the future challenges? Already we are being challenged by the wars that is happening all around us today. The Ukraine wars, this Hormuz thing happening, the Iran wars happening, and also the conflicts in our own country, the conflicts happening in other countries, relating to gender, relating to social structures, relating to economic issues, and the big threat, that's the climate change and the political upheavals. These are the future challenges. We are all surrounded by all these challenges, and we have to fight against that. So today, the danger of devastating global conflict, threatens the continued existence of humanity. The natural sciences, they have little to contribute, because in this area, only literature can help. because it's an issue of human conflict. So it forms a unique treasure of possible behaviors and solutions, because they're able to draw on a knowledge of life that has been transported over thousands of years. So comparative literature, I feel, should not withdraw into delicate niche topics or into an ivory tower. Rather, it has to take an active part in creating, updating, and bring the social benefits of the human spirit to the fore. The French cultural theorist and writer Ronald Barthes finds an apt formulation for this. He says the literatures of the world function as a social early warning system that should serve as guideline for broad-based comparative literature. It must do so in a way that is internationally understandable and bring together a wide variety of languages. So comparative global literature must face up to these new challenges, and respond to them with a multipolar concept of world's literature rather than a Western-centered one, as it was happening before. If you take the Nobel Prize winners, say Naipaul, say Hector Muller, say Mario Vargas Llosa, Salman Rushdie, Mahasweta Devi, feminist writers, IGNOU Achebe, all these writers, great writers, seminal writers, they have beautifully in a great way contributed to connect the most diverse literatures of the world, because they have talked about the sensitive issues related to human life. So these are the future challenges, but there are also challenges, for our researchers, and that's very important for us. What challenges they are faced when they deal with such literature? First thing is the language proficiency. Scholars must be proficient in the source languages to accurately interpret and analyze the text. So because language barriers is a great, a significant challenge. Next, cultural competence. Different cultures. When we talk of world literature, it's different cultures. When you talk of cultures, then are different symbols, different context. So these are all very challenging, and you have to grasp them, understand them, go deep into this text. Not only subjectively, but from an objective point of view, you have to understand. Next come the most important is the translation issue. So when you're translating the text, there is always, you have to take care of the accuracy and the fidelity of translation. You cannot, make your innovation into it or change the entire concept of it. So you have to be very truthful, very loyal, and go very ethically about it. Next is the interdisciplinary approach. This approach, again, the researchers have to have when they go to the texts of different disciplines. They should not confine to only one text. So if the canvas is broad, if they're well versed with the different texts of the world, that gives a broad view to them, and they understand better when they translate, go for world literature translation and other things. I told you about the ethical considerations. So they have to be very sensitive. The scholars, the researchers have to be very sensitive to the ethical considerations, because they should not misinterpret, they should not misappropriate. And this is important because when studying literature from the marginalized, about the marginalized or the underprivileged classes, you have to be very, very particular. You have to be very sensitive, and you should not try to distort or misinterpret. That's very important. Cross-cultural misinterpretation also takes place. Misunderstanding because they're different cultures. This leads to, you can say, misalignment with the author's original intentions. So the author's original intent has to be reflected by the translator. And then I told you about the access to texts. So he has to, the researcher, the students have to have access to different literary works of different cultures. They have to develop a taste. They have to develop a taste, a passion. And especially from the remote cultures, or you can say the less read areas, or the less well known or less accessible regions. These are where areas still not, you can say, investigated or invaded by literatures. So you have, these are the hurdles for researchers. So you have to have, keep all this in mind when you are going to study this comparative world literatures. So a 2023 study by the Global Studies in Literature and Culture group shows that 85% of scholars believe that the future of comparative world literature will become more interdisciplinary, drawing insights from digital humanities, transmedia studies, and global cultural studies. So using this big data, we can now have a more comprehensive picture of how literature functions in the globalized world. Indeed, the future of comparative literature will lie in its being able to engage with new methods, utilize emerging genres in analyzing the transnational flow and transformation of literary narratives. The study of comparative world literature in the context of globalization, you can say, reminds us that literature provides the most vital medium through which intercultural dialogue might be forged and through which diverse narratives of a globalized world might continue constructing their own stories. So with the latest technologies, global literature will continue to expand and diversify. And we are sure, we are confident that a new horizon is awaiting the expansion of global world literature. So thanking you all.
बहुत बहुत आभार मैम, आपके इस सारगर्भित व्याख्यान के लिए आपका हृदय से धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू सो मच, थैंक यू सो मच।
अब मैं अत्यंत प्रसन्नता के साथ आज की द्वितीय विशिष्ट वक्ता डॉक्टर प्रिथा बनर्जी जी का परिचय प्रस्तुत करना चाहूंगी। डॉक्टर प्रिथा बनर्जी विद्यासागर मेट्रोपॉलिटन कॉलेज में सहायक प्राध्यापिका हैं और इको क्रिटिसिज्म, इको फेमिनिज्म, डीप इकोलॉजी, इको थियोलॉजी तथा होप स्टडीज जैसे क्षेत्रों में विशेषज्ञता रखती हैं। उनका शोध साहित्य और पर्यावरण के अंतर संबंधों पर केंद्रित है। उनके डॉक्टरेट शोध में मार्गरेट एटवुड के साहित्य का पर्यावरणीय मानविकी यानी एनवायरमेंटल ह्यूमैनिटीज के संदर्भ में विशेष रूप से आशा की अवधारणा से के साथ विश्लेषण किया गया है। वे एक प्रतिष्ठित कवयित्री भी हैं और उनके लेख विभिन्न पत्रिकाओं एवं पुस्तकों में प्रकाशित हो चुके हैं, जिनमें पारिस्थितिक आपदा, ग्राफिक नैरेटिव में संवेदना, स्टीरिन कीड़े, रस्किन बॉन्ड तथा गोंड कला और बाल साहित्य के माध्यम से भौतिक इको क्रिटिसिज्म जैसे गंभीर विषय शामिल हैं। उन्होंने अंतरराष्ट्रीय स्तर पर विशेषकर अमेरिका स्थित ASLE जैसे मंचों पर अपने शोध पत्र प्रस्तुत किए हैं। एक दशक से अधिक के शिक्षण अनुभव के साथ वे शिक्षण, आशावादी शोध, यात्राओं तथा अकादमिक एवं सामाजिक मंचों पर सार्थक संवाद के माध्यम से पर्यावरणीय जागरूकता के प्रसार को अपना जीवन दृष्टि मानती है। अब मैं सादर डॉक्टर प्रिथा बैनर्जी जी से निवेदन करती हूँ कि वे अपना व्याख्यान प्रस्तुत करें। मैडम प्लीज।
Good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Paramita, for that wonderful introduction. But thank you, I have to say thank you to Dr. Nandini. She has been such an inspiration for all these years. And thank you for this invitation to speak here. It means a lot. And thank you for your very warm words of welcome at the beginning. They inspire me to think deeper, think more critically, speak better, keep writing. And thank you, Dr. Silima, for that wonderful presentation on comparative world literatures. I think it's the most amazing lecture after which I'll be speaking. Thank you for that. This invitation, in fact, Dr. Nandini, it made me think about one of the major concerns of my research being interbeing, where I look at this webbed matrix of life of the human, the non-human, the more than human or the other than human, and representation of this interbeing. I have been looking at this through Margaret Atwood, of course, in the course of my thesis. But I've also been looking at the same element in, for example, Eastern Kire and other Northeast writers. When I got this invitation, I started thinking about the confluences of such writing. And today, my discussion, it is just a discussion, and I hope a lot of other thoughts and ideas come up through this, is how this representation of interbeing or the meshwork of the human and the non-human uh, is facilitated by certain writers. In my present talk, I'll be looking at certain writings by Margaret Atwood and certain writings by Eastern Kire, and looking at the confluence of their ideas, even though they are so disparate. I mean, geographically, socio-politically, and in terms of time, they are functioning in different registers. I mean, Atwood, as we all know, being a Canadian writer, very well known, of course, and writing about global concerns. Initially, writing about also Canada, writing about her own struggle to establish her writing as a Canadian writer. And on the other hand, we have Eastern Kire, who is a Naga writer in diaspora, and who, in her works, especially, we see is writing about Naga Angami folklore. And there are retellings of the folklore. And it is done in various ways through, there are these picture books where you have amazing artwork. I'll be talking about the artwork as well, as much as is possible in this very condensed discussion that I have today. But these writings, while being so separate, at the same time, I found a certain thread running through both certain writings of both these writers, which prioritizes the intuitive, which prioritizes the mystical, which prioritizes a different approach to what we are terming as nature or as human beings or our connection with nature. And I think this is very significant or important when we are looking at literature which tries to evolve our ecological consciousness, or we are trying to experience an expanded sense of the self. If you're looking at, looking at everything through deep ecology perspective, where it's only when we feel that, when we feel the rest of the world as ourselves, or we feel ourselves as this ecological self, that it becomes an automatic means of living a life which is aware, or living a life which is ecologically aware. No one has to tell us that, don't cut that tree, because we experience the rest of the world as ourselves. Now, this experience, of course, this is, of course, the acme of realization, which, for example, we see in Arne writing, which he hopes will be the state which every environmental activist or every writer reaches for. But even if that absolute state is not reached, there is a certain process, I think, that is enabled through writing of such eco-activist writers, right? We also find a certain expression of this in Donna Haraway's idea of entities and assemblages, where she also talks about representation. Now, why such representation? Why are we talking about representation? I particularly found this discussion by Kerry Whiteside important, where he says that this environmental crisis is not so much about what is happening to nature. It is more a crisis of representation, because at the end of the day, representation in the form of art, in the form of literature, has so much impact on our consciousness. Everyone who was reading that book, who is engaging with that artwork, is engaging perhaps with a film, with a painting, with any kind of expression, with a poem that can change the person's consciousness. And it's at the level of the individual, and change at the level of individual consciousness, which can then spread to a lot of other consciousness, to the extent that then it can become a larger collective awareness. And therefore, this entire reflection is towards forging a form of representation which is separate from the modernist tendency of representing things as, as things or as citizens, or separating the human from the non-human, or nature from culture, or the masculine from the feminine. And of course, here I am talking about the very heavily contested idea of dualisms that Val Plumwood talks about. We've all read her work, and we know how she talks about the hierarchized patriarchal dualisms which influence representation, or which influence discussions in art, in literature, wherever we are reading this, and asks us to become aware of that, and tries to again find a form of representation which is separate. I would also like to think about Bruno Latour, right? Because Bruno Latour talks about the collective, and he again asks for a kind of non-modern approach to representation, where everything is part of the collective that he talks about, which is people, things, non-humans, other than human, more than human, technology. Everything is part of that larger collective, which he discusses in great detail. And this, I think, is a very important concept, even as we are looking at these writers or thinking about the writings, which I'll just go towards or discuss certain texts, which I think is important for our discussion here, is this collective is continuously evolving. It's dynamic. Every day it has to be reconstructed, and every day the voices of all the beings have to come together. This is important as we understand that representation can be both negative as well as positive. It can be a very powerful actualizing force. And personally, for me, when I'm looking at literature and ecology, wherever I go or talking about it, I keep considering how such representation can influence our consciousness, and how the subtle codes of power which are embedded in such writing, can it be redone? Can something happen through that writing, through that painting, through that artwork, is something which I keep looking at, right? To go towards, directly move towards a discussion of the texts that I would like to talk about today. For example, I want to start with discussing, there's a short story by Atwood called The Tent. This is part of her collection, The Tent, which has many short stories in it. There's so many actually, but I'm just selecting a few for this discussion. In The Tent, we see this writer who is inside a tent, and she can hear the sounds of the wilderness outside. And these sounds start growing louder and louder. And as she's writing inside, she feels that they're going to invade the tent. And then she starts writing within the tent. And it's almost like that writing is her only way of preserving herself, or a sense of self or identity is through that writing. And there's a candle burning as she's writing, and she knows that that candle is attracting the other beings who are outside, which is undefined. I mean, the non-human, in the form of it may be animals, it may be other kinds of beings which she cannot directly represent, which are moving towards the tent. And as she keeps writing, there's this feeling that she's getting invaded. She's losing her sense of identity and self as the tent is getting invaded. And she starts writing frantically backwards and on the tent. Now, writing, therefore, becomes one of the means by which the characters in Atwood, and later we'll also see in Kire, they try to hold on to this sense of an identity, a self, and at the same time, it also becomes a limit. It becomes a possibility and it becomes a limit. This will also bring us, of course, to a discussion of the possibilities of language when we are looking at comparative world literatures. And like Dr. Silima also talked about this, is language being so central and important here, language being a huge possibility because it's conveying so much. And at the same time, can you convey something which is absolutely unknowable? Can you convey something which is expanding your limits beyond the human? How do you convey that? Of course, this is bringing us, I mean, what I would remember instantly or immediately here is I would think about Leonard Skigach, where he's talking about language which acts as a reference. So language which points to the limits of what it cannot do, or language which startles you so much, like Gary Snyder also talks about this, right? Where Snyder says that language should take you to such a point that it amazes you, it startles you, and then it takes you to that point of the unknown, or that point of what cannot be known, and which is left for you to experience, which cannot be said in words. So the writings of Atwood and Kire, I think, do this is in a wonderful manner. In the tent also, it is we are left at this point where we do not know what happens to her as the tent starts burning, the candle starts burning, and the animals start invading. This is also seen in other works by Atwood. For example, in Surfacing, which is such an important text which we look at whenever we do any kind of eco-critical reading of Atwood, right? In Surfacing, we see this narrator who is never named. The fact that she's never named also, she remains as a part of the wilderness which she ultimately enters. We see her going back to the Canadian bush, and she is looking for her father because her father's gone missing. And as she goes back to the wilderness and she starts searching for her father, and her friends are there with her, she suddenly starts disconnecting from the friends who are there with her, and she starts connecting with the forest, she starts connecting with the lake, with the trees, and the memories of her childhood start washing over her, and she feels that she is entering a certain connection with the wilderness, or she is connecting with the wilderness in such a way that will reveal a certain mystery to her, which will reveal a certain connection with her own self, which she has lost while living in the city, which she has lost while inhabiting spaces which continuously separate the mind and the body, or emotions, feelings from thinking. And she feels this sort of split within her when she goes to the forest. And then she starts thinking about how she can connect to the wilderness, or connect actually to her own self. And we see in the course of the text, as it moves along, we see her initially resisting when the forest is trying to invade her, and then later on we see her totally surrendering and understanding that the wilderness is going to reveal something which she cannot, with any of the limits of language, any of the limits of the narratives which she has absorbed in the city, or in in when she's working in her work sphere, can actually give her what she can experience in the wilderness. And she walks into the wild. We see her letting go of complete human interaction. She drops cooked food. She stops talking. She also drops human company, clothes, and she starts living in the wilderness, trying to access something else, an unknown dimension, which then she starts experiencing. It's also very interesting that through the course of the text, the father whom she was searching for, she cannot find her father. And she comes to an understanding that her father has become a part of the wilderness, and she doesn't wish him to come back either, because she feels that there is a certain different, what she calls, the power which she experiences as she submerges herself in the lake, physically as well as metaphorically. The name of the novel is Surfacing, and she surfaces with a separate understanding of herself, a separate, totally different self which emerges. So the wilderness has a power to change or to alter in ways which cannot be fathomed. This is also seen in Kire, for example. Like when we are looking at Kire, we'll be seeing there's this particular story. I'm starting to talk about, I think, all the writings together. Then we'll have, it will be more interesting to see the confluences there instead of separating that. But Kire, retelling a Naga Angami tale over here. This is a story about a bear who becomes a man. This is part of a particular collection of short stories, The Rain Maiden and the Bear Man. And part of that, you have this individual who walks into the forest, and once he walks into the forest, he changes into a bear. Now, this might appear strange. What happened? In the world of Naga Angami folklore, which is what Kire specializes in, she also uses a bit of Chakisang, a bit of other folklore, but mainly Angami folklore. We see that the forest is a space which is peopled by spirits and peopled by experiences which cannot be demarcated or limited to by culture or by definition, or a hyper rational sort of understanding of these spaces. Whenever somebody enters the forest, if they're not careful, like they use wormwood behind the ears as a kind of protection or a talisman, and if that wormwood is not used and they walk into the forest, something changes. There can be a huge attraction to perhaps a spirit which is singing, like we see in the Rain Maidens, the Mami Water spirits, which attract people. And then people disappear. We do not know what happens to them. Most probably they die, or most probably they also turn into spirits and they start peopling these forests. The forests are full of both benevolent as well as malicious spirits, and there's a huge amount of folklore surrounding this that we see in Kire's writings. So this man who enters the forest and then becomes a bear, he is when the body turns into that of a bear, but his mind remains. Interestingly, in this particular story, his mind remains human, and he is extremely confused about what to do now, and it's very painful for him because he wants to go back to his family and he cannot. He stepped onto that other side. And we see this great deal of effort being made by the people, the characters in Kire's writings, who try to keep this sort of a limit or this kind of boundary between the human and the non-human, because the other can totally engulf you, invade you, and you do not know, then you lose your sense of self. This man has crossed over, and then he cannot come back. He wants to come back, and then his family cannot recognize him, right? They'll think he's a bear, so they'll get scared of him. Now, what to do? The other bears in the forest, they accept him, but he doesn't feel a part of that. He feels disjointed, and it's quite horrific, tragic, and at the same time very wondrous what happens, because you have the people from the village who are looking for this man. The family members they have no idea what happened, and they send these men to the forest to look for this man, and as they are looking for that, they come across this bear which is the man, and they cannot understand, and they shoot him because they think that this bear has killed the man. And he cries out, trying to say that this is me, but he cannot convey that. And it's a very poignant story. As if you read the story, you're wondering what will happen to the last moment. And then when the people discover the bear's body, they find certain markings on the body which was similar to that of the man who was lost in the forest. And there's a fleeting thought that maybe this was the man, but is lost. Now, this sense of this change happening in the wilderness, or the wilderness changing you, altering you totally, is something which is also seen in Atwood's writing, particularly her early writing or early poetry, which I've been studying for quite a while now. In her early poetry, for example, there is this poem called The Wereman. In The Wereman as well, just like, I'm just comparing this with Kire's. So interesting, so separate in time, so separate in geopolitical realities, but talking about something fundamentally perhaps similar in human consciousness and human perception is the Wereman, the speaker, is apprehending that her husband is going to enter the forest. This is from the collection, The Journals of Susanna Moodie. So it is talking about British immigrants as they are trying to settle in the Canadian bush, and the difficulties of that, and the entire wilderness becoming a space which is both something thrilling, attractive, at the same time something which is scary, something which is frightening, because you do not know what it holds. So when the husband is going out, the speaker is saying that when my husband is setting out, I do not know what will happen when he is unheld by my gaze. So when I am not holding him by my gaze, and therefore the gaze of culture, or the gaze of the rational world, or the gaze of the world which defines everything, or if I can extend this to a modern form of representation, knowing or knowledge or apprehension, then the husband will change into something which is absolutely unknown. We do not know what he will change into. And this feeling is further, I think, I would also like to refer to another poem by Atwood, which is Progressive Insanities of a Pioneer. This is a pretty famous kind of poem, which I guess a lot of students will connect with because they must be reading it in their syllabi. But here we see pioneer, of course, quote unquote, because here it's talking about again, the British immigrant who's trying to trying to control the land, trying to possess the land, use it, define it in a certain way. And when the pioneer tries to do so, the moment he enters the wilderness, he feels swamped. He tries to control, and the wilderness takes over him. And then he says, let me out. He cannot understand what he's been swamped by. And there's this line, very powerful line by Atwood in this poem, everything is getting in. And the feeling of reading the poem itself is so magical, because as you're reading it, you see his continuous resistance. He's trying to hold on to his sense of identity. He's trying to control. And at the same time, this feeling of being swamped, okay, where by unstructured space, he's trying to structure it. He's trying to, till the land. He's trying to grow a crop, and the land is then taking him in. And he feels taken in by this unstructured space, or he feels that he is not himself anymore. And this change is slowly traced in the course of the poem itself, as we see that. And this green self, or this green hole, which takes him over and changes him, is further intensified by the physical act. He stomps into the ground, and the ground loses its solidity, and his feet go into the soil. And he's totally taken in by the earth, physically, metaphorically, emotionally, and that green vision invades him. This is something which we also see in Atwood surfacing. This is also something which we see in a lot of Kire's writings. Kire's writings, of course, also weaving in the aspect of death. Now, talking about death, death also has to be discussed here, because in case of Atwood and in case of Kire, Kire's in a different sense. Kire's writings or short stories keep talking about the spirit world. So, and there's also this constant discussion of life and death, because the Naga Angami folklore, as discussed, like if we look at the work by Anderson and Watiki, for example, who are talking about the importance of retelling such folklore, because again, it provides an access into the world, or the realm of spirits, or the realm of nature, the realm of the mystical, the realm of the unknown, which is not provided by a modern discourse. And Anderson and Watiki are especially talking about this because, for example, they say that when a person dies, the medical understanding of it just takes away this mystical or spiritual approach towards life and death, which the folktales provide a Naga person or anybody else who is reading that folklore and trying to find a different connection between life and death. Now, death also becomes a point of access in Atwood's writings. How? For example, in surfacing itself, when she enters the wilderness, or when she's trying to access the wilderness, it is from a point of access. It is from a point of, there's a certain lacunae in her life, which enables this perception, or which enables this access into the unknown in surfacing, as well as in other poetry written by her. We find this point reflected. This is also reflected in greater detail in Kire's text. Going a little more into Kire, because what we are trying to do right now is trying to find a different form of knowing. Like Helen Sixu, we know, calls for this different kind of knowing, which is different from the model of knowledge and power, which inflects all other forms of knowing or epistemologies, which try to enforce something, which try to derive something. But a different form of access or a different form of knowing, can that be found? This has been my search through all my research, all my talks. I keep searching for this alternative epistemology, an epistemology which allows the unknown, which allows that which cannot be defined, and at the same time reveres that, at the same time celebrates that as something defining human possibility or human life and our experiences. So as we are searching for this, we are going a little more into detail into Kire's text, or one or two more examples of this is, for example, there's one more story, this one which I talked about, which is The Man Who Became a Bear. We saw that. There is another, like you have River and Earth, where in River and Earth, the short story, the images which we see in the books, if we look at the short stories, I urge everyone who perhaps hears this to look at the short stories and to look at the books with its illustrations. And the artwork itself reflects all the beings which are interlaced within each other. So the human, the non-human, the trees, the spirits, the animals, everything is merged together. And the forest is that space of which is providing access into a different aspect of life. We find this. There is a very important tale called Forest Song. I found this particularly remarkable. In this, you have a little girl, Zeno. Now, Zeno has been molested, unfortunately, by her friend's father, and she's running from him. And as she's running from him, she runs into the forest without the wormwood, without any talisman. She just runs into the forest because she is being, there's another, the man is following her. As she runs into the forest, she meets an old woman and she feels safe with this old woman. Now, from this moment that she meets the old woman, there is a gap. And the next moment we see her parents are looking for her, Zeno's parents are looking for her, and they are going around the forest, they're going everywhere, they cannot find her. And ultimately they decide that she is no more, she must have died. Now, what we understand, therefore, is the forest becomes a space of refuge for a lot of individuals, not just, we'll also see some other characters. But going into the space also, therefore, opens one into the possibility of being touched by the unknown and entering the realm of the spirits, where one may not come back from, or one may, therefore, have access to a different form of understanding, but one will be totally changed by this connection with the wilderness or with the forest that we see in the forest song. In Zeno's case, it is a space of refuge, but at the same time, it also absorbs her, it takes her in, it invades her or changes her in a certain sense. This forest space is also a space which gives access to a lot of powers. For example, there is a very interesting story called the Silver Zuli. Here we have this character called Thezui. Thezui experiences this great power whenever she thinks about her father who is in the spirit world, or connects with her father in the spirit world. And this becomes a point of access into a greater power. And there is this description that her whole body feels like it's dissolving into nothingness, becoming part of the exhilarating experience of oneness with the illimitable sky and the immortal warrior spirit. So the forest space also provides this kind of access. Yes, it again changes Thezui totally. And when he comes back to the world of the living, he cannot be a part of everyone in the same way as he was before. Okay, so this change happens through the course of the text. There's one more which I'd like to refer to back and forth as I'm going towards Atwood and going towards Keyring. This very interesting discussion. I mean, which this lecture has made me think as well in so many new ways. There's this very interesting story called The Man Who Lost His Spirit. So there is this character called Pezui. Pezui suddenly loses his spirit in the forest. And then he struggles to bring his spirit back into the body. He tries a lot of things. He tries to sing to the spirit. He tells the spirit that, look, I mean, you've been with me. You see, we've had such a good life together. When you were in my body, then, we could live. We had all these great moments. Come back to me, come back to me. He tries all these things. He tries to trap Pezui back into his body by closing the gates of the house, but he cannot access his spirit anymore. It goes into the forest and it does not want to enter this realm of limits anymore, because there's a limit which is imposed by the body or by such human consciousness. And this again, I think also signals something that Kire is trying to say through such retellings of Naga folklore, which we find in Zeno's story and in Pezui's story. We see that they are, in both the cases, the realm of culture is something which is limiting, or the house as representing the realm of culture, the realm of the rational, the realm of, defining everything. That realm becomes a limitation. And the moment people step into the forest, that is unstructured space, just like Atwood was saying, and the whole invading or getting in, which opens up new possibilities. These possibilities may be positive, may be negative, may be anything, but they are other possibilities. For example, this also, I think, connects with another short story by Atwood, which I'd like to refer to. It's called Death by Landscape. It's a very strange and startling story because you have these two girls, Louis and Lucy, and they have both set out. They've gone camping. As they've gone camping, strangely enough, what happens? Yes, Dr. Paramita. Yes, I'll just be wrapping up. Okay, so yeah, this is just the last story I'm referring to as I'm tying the threads together. They've gone camping, and then suddenly they leave the rest of the group and they decide we're going to go to the cliff. As they enter the wilderness, something happens. What happens, nobody knows, but only one girl comes back, which is Louis. Lucy never comes back, and Louis, throughout her life, keeps looking for Lucy in paintings of the landscape where she feels that maybe Lucy is just behind that tree, just behind that canal. Where is Lucy? And she keeps looking for Lucy. What happened in the wilderness? No one knows. But we understand that the forest or the wilderness changed their consciousness totally, Lewis and Lucy, and perhaps something happened where they behaved in ways which they would not ordinarily have in the realm of culture or in the city, amongst people, in human interaction. So it opens up a huge world of possibilities. It opens up a different kind of interbeing or meshwork that we are talking about over here. And this meshwork, I think, awareness of this meshwork is the first step towards understanding an expanded sense of self, an expanded sense of ourselves with nature, nature in and for itself, nature not as the environment, which is a more anthropocentric way of looking at nature in terms of its utility to human beings, but rather nature as in and for itself, with all its mysteries, with everything that cannot be known, accepting that and entering perhaps a different kind of epistemology, a different kind of knowing, which allows us to experience ourselves in ways we ourselves do not know. Thank you so much for listening to me.
आपके इस क्या कहूँ मैं ज्ञानवर्धक व्याख्यान के लिए तहे दिल से आभार मैम। अब मैं माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू मैडम से अनुरोध करती हूँ कि वे अपने बहुमूल्य विचार हमारे साथ साझा करें। मैडम प्लीज।
Thank you, Dr. Paramita. I was attentively listening to both of them, of course, while dealing with quite a few other things. But yes, Dr. Silima Nanda, she offered a very nuanced understanding of comparative world literatures. And then she situated lots of texts under the dynamics of globalization, power, and power circulation. She just gave a comprehensive idea of what is comparative world literature as a discipline, or what kind of things should go into the research on comparative world literatures. And she mentioned mythology off and on, and the translation productivity, she talked about that quite frequently, how translation, which is both ethical and political, I mean, as an act, it's both ethical and political, its importance in the comparative world literature pedagogy, she emphasized on that. And then somewhere she talked about linking comparative literature with the global literary flows, and also with the local epistemologies. So her comprehensive lecture was definitely well received. And then coming to Dr. Pritha Banerjee, she engaged comparative world literature with a confluence of writers. She mentioned so many writers across the human and non-human, engagements. And then she talked about the ecological thoughts, deep ecology as a part of comparative literature, and Anthropocene and the literary frameworks thereof as a part of comparative literature. This idea of the human world and the animal world, the world of plants as well, how all of them come together, and then they create a more empathetic and a more flexible platform for comparative literature departments, was something that Pritha emphasized. And when we design our syllabus, Pritha, we will certainly ask you, we request you to send your inputs, maybe some important texts vis-a-vis comparative literary theories and also practice. You can send us some texts of your interest, we will consider. And then Pritha also engaged with writers like Margaret Atwood, alongside some Canadian studies and Northeastern Indian writers. That is a very good comparison. Margaret Atwood kind of writers, and then coming to again our Northeast India, how deep ecology is a part of both their texts. So you emphasized here and there about that. And then ecology, vulnerability studies, then the survival of a borderless literary world. This was very fascinating for me, a borderless world. And that is how comparative literature should be promoted, isn't it? There is one journal also, borderless journal, just looking at it. And then the inclusion of artworks. So text, literary texts and art as context. So Pritha emphasized on the inclusion of artworks and ecological aesthetics comparative literature beyond texts, that is something, and then showing how environmental crisis, landscape, cultural memory studies is coming up in a big way. So you mentioned memory studies more than once, and then also literature across boundaries of nation, genres, and disciplines. So precisely, you want to bring these kind of very solid and very important and interesting things to the university table, which we have hitherto been neglecting. We are not taking these things to our university tables. We take rather very safe, quote unquote, safe kind of subjects to our university syllabi. And your intervention was very fresh. You want to take things that I have been thinking about, and of course we have been doing. I like look at MA folk literature, look at MA folklore and culture studies. In Hindi University also we have 4 disciplines as of now, and the new disciplines that are coming up, we are trying to be very flexible there. We have designed the tentative syllabi, and we have sent those to appropriate bodies for approval, and probably in very near future we will be in a position to introduce very innovative kind of courses, including one MA in comparative world literatures, which we have been thinking a lot about. So thank you once again, Pritha, for being a part of Hindi University, and of course for sharing your interesting research with us. And congratulations, Paramita, for this successful seminar. Please take over. Thanks.
थैंक यू मैम। आज के इस सारगर्भित एवं चिंतन समृद्ध वेबिनार के समापन अवसर पर मैं हृदय से अपनी कृतज्ञता प्रकट करना चाहूंगी। सर्वप्रथम मैं आदरणीय अध्यक्ष महोदया, माननीय कुलपति प्रोफेसर नंदिनी साहू जी के प्रति अपनी सादर धन्यवाद ज्ञापित करती हूँ, जिनकी गरिमामय उपस्थिति और प्रेरक उद्बोधन ने इस आयोजन को एक विशिष्ट ऊंचाई प्रदान की। मैं हमारे माननीय वक्तागण प्रोफेसर सिलिमा नंदा जी एवं डॉक्टर प्रिथा बनर्जी जी के प्रति भी हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करती हूँ, जिनके ज्ञानपूर्ण एवं गहन विचारों ने इस सत्र को अत्यंत समृद्ध और अर्थपूर्ण बनाया। हिंदी विश्वविद्यालय पश्चिम बंगाल के प्रति भी मैं अपनी कृतज्ञता व्यक्त करती हूँ, जिसके सतत सहयोग और प्रोत्साहन से इस प्रकार के अकादमिक आयोजन सफलतापूर्वक संपन्न होते हैं। साथ ही हमारी तकनीकी टीम सुश्री काजोरी दास रॉय एवं श्री अमन सिंह का विशेष धन्यवाद, जिनके दक्ष संचालन से ये कार्यक्रम सुचारू रूप से आयोजित हो चुका है। अंततः मैं सभी प्रतिभागियों का भी धन्यवाद करती हूँ, जिनकी सक्रिय सहभागिता ने इस वेबिनार को सार्थक बनाया। इसी के साथ आप सभी की अनुमति से इस सत्र का समापन करती हूँ। पुनः आप सभी का हार्दिक धन्यवाद। नमस्कार।